In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 NBA games happening on March 6th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 NBA games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Dallas Mavericks versus Boston Celtics. Friday brings Dallas into Boston for a showdown at TD Garden in what feels like two teams heading in opposite emotional directions. Dallas is limping into this spot after losses to the Magic and Hornets, with the Raptors coming up next on the schedule. They have dropped 15 of their last 17 games, which is a rough stretch for a roster that still carries real-name talent. Boston, on the other side, just handled the Bucks before getting punched in the mouth by the Hornets, and they now look ahead to Cleveland. Even with that stumble, they have taken 16 wins out of their last 22, so the broader trend still tilts strongly their way. Dallas remains without Brandon Williams, Marvin Bagley III, Kyrie Irving, and Derek Lively II, which keeps their rotation thin and their margin for error even thinner. Boston has Jason Tatum ruled out again, so their ceiling on offense takes a hit even if their structure and habits hold up. Even with that, Dallas showed some fight in that narrow loss to Orlando, and they did it with flag on a minute's restriction, which matters because it proves they have not checked out mentally. Boston came into that Hornets game on a heater, then got humbled in their own building, which tends to sharpen focus rather than dull it. They have been rock solid all season, so a response here is more likely than some extended slump, especially at home. Their record of 41-21 comes with one of the stronger defensive profiles in the league, holding opponents to just 107.1 points per game, while Dallas sits at 21-41 and is dragging a 5-game losing streak behind them. If you look only on paper, that gap in record and defensive numbers, plus the earlier prospect of Tatum being back in the mix, explains why the line is as inflated as it is. Here is the thing, though, control and margin are not twins. A big favorite can own the flow of a game and still leave the back door wide open in the final few minutes. This type of number bakes in the idea that Boston not only takes charge early, but keeps its foot down for a full 48 minutes, which is a different kind of ask. There are two strong pushes in the market narrative here. First, Boston is coming off that ugly 118-89 home loss to Charlotte, which naturally invites people to expect a statement bounce back and bet them accordingly. Second, Dallas looks toxic to casual bettors because of the losing streak, which makes it easy to write them off without actually watching how they are playing. But the Mavericks just lost by a single point to Orlando on Thursday, which is a quiet but important signal that they can still drag a game into a possession-by-possession grind. That exact style of game is how huge underdogs hang around inside inflated ranges, because every empty trip matters and every extra rebound steals a little value from the favorite. No one is pretending this Dallas group is suddenly reliable or good enough to threaten Boston wire to wire. The point is that the sheer volume of points you are getting asks the Celtics to keep their intensity meter high from tip to buzzer. After the Charlotte mess, Boston's main job is to restore order, settle the locker room, and remind everyone who they are, not necessarily to chase style points on the scoreboard. As our first pick for this matchup, the Dallas Mavericks to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Dallas is averaging 114.4 points on 47.3% shooting, but they are also giving up 117.7 points on 46.8% shooting, which paints a picture of a team that plays in plenty of high-scoring environments because their defense keeps leaking. They are hitting 34.2% from 3 and just 74.5% at the free throw line, so even when they create chances, they sometimes leave points scattered on the floor. They allow 34.3% shooting from deep and pull down 44.7 rebounds per game, which keeps them competitive on the glass but still vulnerable on the perimeter. Boston sits at 114.8 points per game on 46.6% shooting, which is efficient but not wild run and gun. Defensively, they are holding teams to 106.9 points on 44% shooting, and that kind of resistance can slow the whole pace of a night and make every possession feel heavier. They knock down 36.4% from beyond the arc and 79.3% at the free throw line, steady enough to punish lazy defense but not dependent on crazy hot streaks. On the other end, they allow 36% from deep and control 46.2 rebounds per game, which hints at a group that can end possessions quickly and limit second chances. When you mix those numbers with the current context, the shape of the total becomes clearer. Dallas, short-handed and coming off that grinding game against Orlando, is walking into a building where the home team has every reason to lean on its defense and structure. Tatum sitting again takes a chunk out of Boston's top-end scoring punch, which can tilt them toward a slower, more methodical half-court approach. Dallas already tends to give up more than it scores, and against this kind of defense, it is much more likely that their efficiency dips than spikes. Honestly, the combination of Boston's ability to squeeze shot quality, Dallas's shaky free throw shooting, and the emotional bounce-back angle points more toward a game that feels choppy and controlled rather than loose and free-flowing. You can still get mini runs both ways, because that is the nature of this sport, but the underlying math and situation lean toward fewer clean looks, more contested jumpers, and longer trips without scoring. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Miami Heat versus Charlotte Hornets. The Miami Heat head into Friday's matchup with some confidence after taking down the Rockets and the Nets, with the Pistons waiting for them next on the schedule. They have quietly stacked 7 wins in their last 10 games, which says this group is trending in the right direction even if it has not turned into huge headlines yet. Charlotte is riding an even louder wave, coming off wins over the Mavs and Celtics, and they have the Suns on deck. They have taken 16 of their last 19, and that kind of heater will catch anyone's eye, including odds makers and casual bettors who love a hot story. The price here shows that the market is leaning hard into Charlotte's current streak more than the full personality of this matchup. Charlotte is laying a pretty heavy tag, which signals that their recent form, especially that 6-game winning run, is carrying a lot of weight in how this line is built. That 118-89 road beatdown of Boston is doing a lot of the talking, because big blowouts in famous arenas tend to stick in people's minds. When that happens, it is easy for numbers to tilt toward overreaction, and that is how you end up with a capable Miami team catching a very generous amount of points. Here is the thing. The sharper angle is not just that the number feels bloated, it is also about how these teams actually like to play. Charlotte's surge has leaned on pace, confidence, and smooth stretches of offense where the ball is moving and shots fall in rhythm. Miami can live in that world too, and that matters. The Heat do not have to look more athletic than the Hornets. They need to control tempo pockets and throw Charlotte into stretches where the game feels slightly uncomfortable. They can slow it down, work through their sets, or speed it up and score in quick bursts, and both approaches can knock the Hornets off their favorite rhythm. Miami has also rattled off 3 straight wins, but beating Brooklyn twice in the same week and adding a win over Houston does not carry the same emotional punch as blasting Boston on national screens. That is part of why the gap in perception is wider than the gap on the floor. Backing Charlotte at this kind of price is essentially paying full sticker for recency, trusting that the latest run will continue without much resistance from a veteran group that knows how to stay close. Charlotte can absolutely come out on top, but this number asks their supporters to trust them to create and hold real separation against a team that is not likely to roll over. Honestly, it just feels like too many points for this type of matchup, in this spot, against this opponent. As our first pick for this matchup, the Miami Heat to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Miami is averaging 119.9 points on 46.3% shooting, while giving up 117.2 points on 45.8% shooting, which paints a picture of games that often open up on both ends. They are hitting 36.1% from 3 and 78.5% from the free throw line, so when they get clean looks and draw contact, the scoreboard tends to move steadily. They allow opponents to shoot 35% from deep and grab 47.3 rebounds per game, numbers that hint at a team that can control the glass but still lives in some shootout environments. Charlotte is putting up 116 points per night on 46% shooting and allowing 112.6 points on 47% shooting, which again suggests plenty of flow and room for both sides to score. They are knocking down 37.8% from beyond the arc and 81.7% from the free throw line, which is strong enough to punish lazy closeouts and cheap fouls. On the other side, they are giving up 36% from deep and pulling in 46.3 rebounds per game, so they are not exactly locking games into a low-scoring grind. Taken together, those profiles lean toward a matchup where both teams can get to their comfort zones offensively for long stretches. Miami's attack is efficient enough to keep pressure on, and Charlotte has been playing with a kind of offensive confidence that invites up and down stretches rather than slow, bruising basketball. With both defenses allowing opponents to shoot well from outside and both groups showing they can score from multiple levels, long droughts are less likely than trading punches for most of the night. Honestly, when you combine the recent form, the shooting numbers, and the way Charlotte has been running lately, this shapes up more like a game where the scoreboard stays busy than one where it stalls for long. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Portland Trail Blazers versus Houston Rockets. Portland walks into Houston looking like a team that has been living out of a suitcase for a while, finishing off a 5-game road swing with their season still hanging in that messy middle tier of the West. Houston, on the other hand, is sitting in a much more comfortable spot in the standings, stacking wins at home and building the kind of reputation where you expect them to control games in their own building. One group is clinging to the play-in picture, the other is creeping toward the kind of seed that actually comes with expectations, and that gap in pressure and confidence matters more than people admit. It is not just vibes either, it shows up in how their nights usually go. At home, Houston plays at a controlled tempo, somewhere around that 96 possessions per 48 range, yet still manages to score about 113.8 points while holding opponents to roughly 107.3. That is a healthy positive margin, something in the neighborhood of plus 6.7, and it tells you they do not just win in that gym, they tend to separate. Portland on the road lives a much shakier life, under 500 away from home with a negative point differential of about minus 5.1 per game, which is the sort of profile that usually belongs to plucky underdogs rather than serious threats. Some teams travel like a seasoned business flyer with everything neatly in a carry-on. Portland right now feels more like the person wrestling an overstuffed bag into the overhead. Houston's whole identity flows from its defense, and that is where the side really starts to take shape. They sit in that upper tier of the league in terms of making life miserable for scorers, top 5 territory in opponent field goal percentage, and around top 3 in how often they chase shooters off clean three-point looks. They force you into late clock decisions, shared possessions, and tough twos, which is not exactly how modern offenses like to live. Portland does not bring that same kind of edge on that side of the ball, sitting in the middle of the pack overall and around 21st in opponent field goal percentage, giving up a surprising amount of clean looks both inside the arc and beyond it. When one team is shrinking the floor and the other is constantly a half step late, you can guess which one is more likely to build and hold a margin. The personnel picture pushes it further in the same direction. Houston's main core is intact, with Kevin Durant, Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., Clint Capella, Tari Eason, and Amen Thompson all on the active roster and not sitting on today's injury sheet. Their absences are familiar and baked into who they have been for weeks. Sean Tate with a knee issue, Steven Adams with an ankle problem, Fred VanVleet dealing with an ACL injury, and Dorian Finney-Smith monitored with that ankle note that has hovered in the day-to-day space. This is the version of the Rockets that has already been winning and defending and learning how to close games together, so nothing about their rotation here feels experimental. Portland's list tells a different story. Denny Avdija has been dealing with a back issue and is on the report again. Chris Murray sits in that questionable zone with an illness tag. Shaedon Sharpe remains out with a calf problem, and Damian Lillard is sitting out with an Achilles issue. So the Blazers lean hard on Scoot Henderson, Donovan Clingan, Drew Holiday, and Jeremy Grant to drive their offense, and they have to do it on tired legs at the tail end of this trip. It is a lot to ask, especially against a long, physical defense that is comfortable switching and crowding. You can almost feel the possession grind in advance, Houston keeping things in front and Portland having to empty the tank just to stay attached. The schedule spot is a bit tricky on the surface, since Houston is coming off an overtime loss at home to Golden State, but even that tilts more subtly toward the favorite side of this matchup. They did not have to get on a plane, they slept in their own beds, and for a team trying to prove it belongs in that top 4 conversation, these are the nights you circle as must-handle business games. Portland, meanwhile, has walked through Chicago, Charlotte, Atlanta, and Memphis already on this trip, and while they did just hang 122 on the Grizzlies, they have also been giving up close to 119 points per game over their last 10 and about 118.8 over their last 5. That kind of recent defensive track record, combined with road wear and tear, tends to show up late when legs get heavy and the scoreline starts to stretch. All the little edges point in one direction, from home strength to defensive ceiling to travel fatigue. And together they paint a picture of one team more suited to cover a favorite role than the other. As our first pick for this matchup, the Houston Rockets to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Houston scores around 114.7 points per game and allows about 109.5. Portland comes in scoring roughly 115.3 and giving up about 118.3. If you mash those together in a very basic way, just looking at what they usually score and concede, you end up with an expectation landing in that 229 to 230 range. It is not fancy math, it is just both teams' habits stacked on top of each other. Recent form backs that up and adds a little spice. Over their last 5 games, Houston has been averaging about 116.4 points scored and 110.6 allowed. Portland in that same stretch has sat around 111.6 scored and 118.8 allowed, with their pace nudging over 100 possessions per 48 minutes. In plain language, the Rockets' offense has been humming even while they keep the tempo under control, and the Blazers' defense has looked more like an open gym than a locked gate. Games like that do not usually live in the low 200s for very long. Houston's efficiency profile pushes the same idea. They sit in that top 10 range for offense when you look at points per 100 possessions and pair it with one of the stronger defensive ratings in the league, which sounds like a defensive story but quietly hints at consistent scoring too. In their own building, their offensive rating climbs north of 117 points per 100 possessions, which is what happens when you blend comfort, spacing, and a star who bends coverages like Durant does. They are not a reckless volume three-point team, but they shoot it at a good clip and, more importantly for any total, they pound the offensive glass and extend possessions. Those second-chance buckets do not show up on the pace line, yet they push the final tally up little by little. Portland brings the other half of the equation with a defensive profile that practically invites points. They sit near the bottom tier in opponent field goal percentage, and they are below average at running shooters off the three-point line. On the road, they have been giving up around 117.9 points per night with a road defensive efficiency up around 116.5 per 100 possessions. So even if their offense has a cold spell, their defense usually makes sure the scoreboard keeps moving. The head-to-head meetings this season already gave us a preview of what this matchup tends to look like. The 3 previous games finished 140 to 103, 111 to 102, and 111 to 105. That is a total of 243, 213, and 216 points, averaging out around 224 combined. These were not all track meets either. Some came with Houston's defense fully locked in, which makes the totals even more telling. Portland's availability picture adds a bit of chaos, but not in the way people usually assume. They have already had to operate without Denny Avdija at times, and they just hung 122 on Memphis with him sidelined. That suggests that when they lose a key creator, they lean more into tempo, driving and kicking, and basically trying to outscore people for stretches, especially with Shaedon Sharpe and Damian Lillard unavailable and Chris Murray working through that illness tag. It is a little reckless, sure, but that kind of approach tends to help and over rather than hurt it. Houston's side of the schedule, a second leg of a back-to-back, introduces a small wrinkle but not necessarily a slower one. On one hand, tired legs can drag tempo down in the first and fourth quarters. On the other hand, this roster has enough young energy in guys like Amon Thompson, Reed Shepherd, and Tari Eason to keep the middle of the game lively while the veterans pick their spots. A good defense that forces live ball turnovers can actually fuel scoring too, because deflections and steals turn into runouts and early clock threes. Against a defense that has been allowing close to 120 points per game over the last 10, it does not take a wild imagination to see one side flirting with the 115 to 120 range again while the other chips in enough to push the total over a modest expectation. So what you are really looking at is less of a grinded out 104 to 101 rock fight and more of a scoreboard that drifts into that 118 to 108 type territory, where there is enough shot making, enough free throws, and enough second chances to keep the number climbing. When you line up the season averages, the recent trends, the way these teams actually played in their 3 previous meetings, and the current defensive form of Portland, the projected number feels a bit too cautious. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. New Orleans Pelicans versus Phoenix Suns. Phoenix and New Orleans meet again, and it feels like both teams are walking in with completely different agendas. Phoenix is trying to cement themselves in that crowded Western jumble near the top, while New Orleans is basically fighting to prove this season is not already written in pencil. Phoenix has settled into a clear identity, even if it took them a while to get here. They play slow, methodical basketball, one of the slowest paces in the league, which is not exactly what you expect when you hear Suns and think fast break and fire. That pace is not an accident. At roughly 97 possessions per game, they turn most nights into a half-court exam, and they usually grade it themselves with their defense. Defensively, they have been one of the stingiest groups in the league, holding opponents to around 111 points per night, and they are near the top in defensive rating too. The funny thing is, it is not one old-school rim protector making it all work. It is layers. Perimeter contests from guys like Grayson Allen and Jalen Green, long arms funneling drives into help, and a scheme that is happy to force mid-range pull-ups instead of open threes or layups. The personnel mix is a little weird on paper, but it fits the style. Devin Booker is back from that right hip strain and just dropped 27 in the loss to Chicago, so he is fully in the flow again and clearly not being treated like a minutes cap guy. Grayson Allen is spacing the floor, hitting shots, and quietly giving them smart rotations on defense, while Jalen Green has become the chaos creator, the guy who can change a possession with one burst. And they are not at full strength, which is part of what makes their recent defensive consistency even more impressive. Dillon Brooks is out with a broken hand and is expected to miss several weeks. Mark Williams is sidelined with a foot stress reaction for at least a couple more, and Jordan Goodwin is dealing with a calf issue, so all three are officially on the injury list. So Phoenix has had to lean more on length from guys like Royce O'Neal, Amir Coffey, Oso Ighodaro, and Kaman Maluik around that core, which naturally nudges them into even more defense-first lineups. Offensively, they do not blow teams away in raw scoring, and they sit a little above 112 points per game, and that number makes sense when you watch them. Most possessions are deliberate, and they are happy to grind through the clock for a good look instead of chasing early offense every trip. The key for a spread is that the defense rarely disappears for long stretches, and that is what you want when you are trusting a favorite. You want the side that can win a bad shooting night with stops. Across the floor, New Orleans feels like the opposite experiment. They average roughly 115 points a night and play at a quicker pace, around 100 possessions per game, so their games often have that run-and-gun rhythm where you blink and the score jumps by 10. The problem is that the Pelicans almost always give it all back. They allow about 120 points per game, bottom tier in opponent scoring and near the bottom of the league in defensive rating, which is a fancy way of saying teams score on them from everywhere. Zion Williamson is still the gravitational pull of their offense, drawing extra bodies whenever he puts the ball on the floor, and Trey Murphy and Jordan Poole give them real spacing and shot creation. Sadiq Bey and Herb Jones add length and energy, and Jose Alvarado is now back with New Orleans after his mid-season move, bringing that classic pest in your jersey vibe off the bench. All of them are on the active roster, and none of them sits on the current injury report, so unless something changes late, this is the group Phoenix has to solve. DeJounte Murray is the one wild card. He is on the Pelicans roster but is working through reconditioning and was ruled out for their last game against Sacramento, and as of right now his status for this Suns game has not been formally upgraded. If he sits again, New Orleans loses one of their few guards who can reliably organize the offense and defend at the point of attack, which pushes even more load onto Zion, Murphy, and Poole, and tends to make their defense even more fragile. Against this specific Phoenix team, that mix has not gone well for them so far this season. The Pelicans have already faced the Suns 3 times, losing by 23, 7, and 9 points. Those are all multi-possession defeats, and all 3 were games where Phoenix's slower style won the tug-of-war against New Orleans' chaos. That matters for a spread handicap, because you are not just guessing who wins, you are asking whether one team can consistently tilt the game script in its preferred direction. Phoenix has also been one of the better teams in the league against the number over the season, sitting among the top clubs in cover rate, while New Orleans has been profitable but less dominant in that department, which fits how their defense tends to spring leaks at the wrong time. In a matchup where one side is both better structured, healthier at the top of the rotation, and far better on defense, and where the previous meetings have all leaned Phoenix's way by comfortable margins, trusting the favorite to separate again at home feels like the side that makes more sense. As our first pick for this matchup, the Phoenix Suns to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. On paper, the first instinct when you see New Orleans is to think points fest. They score plenty, they give up even more, and their average combined scoring sits in the mid-240s, which is what happens when you mix a loose defense with an offense that is happy to run. Phoenix drags people out of that comfort zone. Their games average roughly 223 combined points, thanks to that slow pace and a defense that holds teams in the low one teens. They are comfortable winning games that feel like long chess matches rather than track meets. When you have a team that wants to sprint and a team that wants to walk, history usually favors the team that can get set, communicate, and make you work for every look. We already have a real sample between these two this season, not just theory. Those three previous meetings landed on 219, 223, and 237 total points, and each one finished under the closing total despite New Orleans pushing pace and Phoenix shooting well enough to win all three. So even when the Pelicans got some rhythm, the Suns' slower tempo and defensive control kept the overall scoring from exploding. Stylistically, that tracks with what Phoenix is built to do right now. Booker back in the lineup adds shot making, but he is also a half-court technician, someone who is fine using 10 extra seconds just to get the matchup he wants, and that naturally eats clock. Without Dillon Brooks and Mark Williams, Phoenix loses some scoring punch and some vertical lob threat, but they do not suddenly become worse at rotating or contesting. If anything, the lineups they roll out lean even more into wings who defend first, score second, which usually nudges totals downward rather than upward. New Orleans can absolutely go off for big numbers. Everyone has seen those wild box scores where they drop 130 plus, but those nights often come against teams that either match their pace or simply do not guard for full possessions. Phoenix is the opposite profile. They are near the top 10 in defensive rating, they keep opponents off the free throw line reasonably well, and they are happy to live with contested twos rather than giving up clean threes and layups. There is also the human side of this spot. The Suns are coming off that frustrating home loss to a depleted Chicago team, so there is every incentive to tighten the screws on defense and send a message in front of their own crowd. On the other side, a Pelicans team that has been grinding through a rough schedule, eating long road trips and taking body blows in the standings, does not always have the legs to sustain a full game of high-octane scoring when forced into a physical half-court game. Put that together, the slowest of the two tempos belongs to the team that controls home court, the better defense, and the cleaner structure, and the previous meetings already showed us that this matchup has a tendency to land below expectations, even when New Orleans gets loose for stretches. So while the Pelicans' season-long profile screams offense, the specific style clash here points more toward a game where possessions take time. The Suns lean on their defense to fix what went wrong against Chicago, and the total ends up lower than most people expect when they first glance at these two logos. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.